So welcome to Nexus, the Belonging Research Network, and to our latest event. And today's event is a research seminar led by Jan GUBE and Aaron CHAN from the Education University of Hong Kong on the topic of belonging in troubling times. For those of you who haven't joined us for one of our events before, let me just introduce us briefly. Nexus, the Belonging Research Network, is a place to explore what it is to belong in contemporary Hong Kong. Our network brings together researchers and students, support NGOs, creative practitioners, and other friends and allies who are interested in issues around belonging in Hong Kong today. Our concern is with the space where migration, cultural identity, language and language learning, education and creative practice all meet. My name is James Simpson and I work in the Division of Humanities here at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and I convene this network. So today we're welcoming you to the 6th event of our series. Jan GUBE and Aaron CHAN will be talking about belonging in troubling times, and the second half of their title is Hong Kong as a Diverse Home for Hopes. Really interesting and intriguing title there. They're going to describe a research journey that explored young people's perceptions of belonging, which coincided with the social unrest in 2019. Why do we have this interest in belonging? Well, belonging alongside culture and identity is a key concept across the social sciences and humanities. Our network provides a space for exploring the many ways of defining and understanding belonging. It provides a space for challenging belonging, for recognizing the challenges of belonging, and for exploring non-belonging. Unbelonging, no longer belonging, and not yet or not quite belonging. And it's a space for thinking about an understanding of how belonging can be negotiated. We recognize its two-way and its dynamic nature. And at this point, I'm going to introduce Jan GUBE more fully. Jan's an assistant professor at the Education University of Hong Kong, and I'm going to quote from his institutional website biography briefly. It says here, Jan initially trained in language studies and has since dedicated his career to understanding the lives and supporting the education of individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds. His research is concerned with larger questions about diversity, equity, race, and ethnicity, with an emphasis on the nexus between schooling and cultural identities, including the implications of these for curriculum and practice. So I first met Jan back in September last year at the very first of our Belonging Research Network seminars, very soon actually after I arrived in Hong Kong myself. In those far off days, we were still meeting face to face, and we were gathered at Christian Action's Centre for Refugees in Chungking Mansions. And I'm delighted to see that our host then, Jeff Andrews, is here with us this afternoon. So welcome, Jeff. I was struck at the time by the overlap between Jan's interests and my own. He and I appeared to have very similar understandings of the importance of belonging as a concept, particularly in education and for linguistic minoritized people, and of its contested nature, and also of the potential power of creative practice and visual methods in applied linguistics research on belonging. And since then, I've delved into his work with great interest. Jan's a prolific and very collaborative writer and researcher. And over the past 10 years, he's published strongly on race and ethnic and cultural identity in Hong Kong, on linguistic minority immigrant students in Hong Kong in relation to classroom practice, teacher education, and schools as institutions, on debates in multiculturalism generally, and on notions of community and diversity in education. And recently, some of his attention, at least, has turned to questions of belonging for Hong Kong's minoritized communities in the context of the social unrest of 2019. Now, to my mind, such upheaval can present an enormous challenge to a sense of belonging for minoritized communities, and not necessarily in a bad or negative way. And it's to this topic that he and his colleague Aaron CHAN are going to be talking to us about today. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Jan and Aaron, who are going to talk about their research and to lead an open conversation about the prospect and challenges of promoting multicultural belonging in our city. And I'll be winding up with a couple of concluding comments around about 5:30, if not before. So I shall stop sharing my screen. I shall hand over to Jan. And like everybody else, I will turn off my my microphone, and over to you, Jan and Aaron.
Thank you so much, James. So let me put on my PowerPoint. All right, so just to double check, is everyone seeing my screen right now? Right, so thank you again, James, for organizing this seminar. I must say that this is a topic that is very close to heart. In many ways, the topic, like apart from my research, it has to do in many ways with my own personal biography, you know, growing up as a Filipino who went through the local education system here, particularly in Chinese medium school. So every time I'm with a group of Chinese people, I kind of think about my identity. When I'm with Filipinos, I kind of think of my identity. So it's a very exciting topic for me. And yeah, long story short, I had an opportunity to work on a project on belonging, particularly on young people's belonging. And here I met Aaron. We were able to collaborate on this project. Just to give you a bit of background about this project, it was actually funded by our university. So we had a very generous support from our Central Reserve Allocation Committee to try to put together this, for us to put together this project. And this project was actually led by Professor Christine House, who is no longer in Hong Kong right now, but we do really appreciate her leadership for this project. And we also acknowledge our colleagues who cannot join us today, Ms. Melissa Au and Ms. Queenie Hon. Yeah, and we have Aaron here. So perhaps Aaron, you can say a bit more about yourself and your involvement in this project.
Sure, Jan. So hi, everyone. My name is Aaron. I work as a research assistant for a couple of years. And I had the absolute pleasure working with Jan and other colleagues on quite a number of topics. So I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting discussion. Back to you, Jan.
Okay, so I think James already mentioned what our presentation is going to be. So we're going to talk about our research journey, not so much on the methodology and those things, but we want to talk about our journey. And because the project was not really designed to explore, back then we didn't know that, you know, the social unrest would happen. It just so happened that, you know, the upheaval occurred. So it sort of changed the trajectory of our research in a way. And so from that, we sort of realized that this socio-political context of Hong Kong did trigger young people to think about and rethink about their sense of belonging in many different ways. But particularly what we would like to do here is to try to talk about this notion of multicultural belonging, right? Focusing not just on the local majority, but also we were drawing attention to the multicultural population groups here in Hong Kong, like the non-Chinese speaking groups here in Hong Kong. So reasons why did we embark on this project, and particularly why belonging in troubling times? So troubling times could mean many things. And based on the literature review that we did before, we already found evidence that young people were not very happy with the socioeconomic and the political conditions in Hong Kong back then. And then some of our research also showed that non-Chinese ethnic minorities do negotiate their cultural and ethnic identities in quite different ways compared to their Hong Kong Chinese counterparts. And I guess what's noticeable here is that the latter group, right, Hong Kong Chinese young people, they tend to be more occupied with the political differences or the political issues that's been going on with Hong Kong, particularly when it comes to their ethno-national identity. So conceptually speaking, the fourth point here is that I guess James expressed that very nicely, that belonging is not really a fixed concept. It's something that we have to negotiate from time to time, right? I feel more strongly as a Hong Konger now, but maybe in the future I feel less strongly as a Hong Konger, or maybe right now I feel strongly as a Filipino, but maybe later on I feel more, I don't know, a mixture of both. And these things are shaped by our peers or people around us, where we live, what's happening in our society, and different events and so forth. So before I start talking about some of the conceptual ideas that we use for this project, I want to engage the participants to think through these questions. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do this. It doesn't have to be technical. So we have 2 questions for you. First, where do you belong? Second, where does your sense of belonging come from? So 3 minutes, you can either speak through the microphone if you like, or you can just type in very short phrases using the chat room. Where do you belong? And where does your sense of belonging come from? Oh, hi, Elizabeth. Thank you. It's a difficult question. Right. Living and working here, yeah, from Kelly, all right. Belonging to the American expat community. Thanks, Michelle. It's hard to think in terms of where I belong without thinking of where I do not belong. Okay. I guess that suggests the idea that the kind of boundaries that occur in our sense of belonging, right? So it's not just about where we belong, but it's also where we do not belong. Very interesting idea. So from Melinda, we see I belong right here because there is no one place that I can claim to belong. Okay, wow, the chat room is very busy now, and this is cool. A sense of multiple belongings from James, right? Belong to China. Okay, from Melissa, recent election in Australia. Feel better about it. Defined by my professional background. Okay, my role as a mother. Yep, the multiple identities or the multiple belongings, right? By professional biographies. Oh, Jeff, where you can integrate to and feel a sense of home. You share the same values, sense of community. Religious community. Where we might belong to, right? I am, right? That personal pronoun I. Yes, in fact, well, thanks, Jason. It's great to know that you're here. We finally met here online. Yes, I guess I'd really like to use the pronoun to analyze or to look at people's sense of belonging. Very interesting point there. Yeah, thank you for engaging with these 2 questions. I think that will help us explain some of the conceptual ideas that we're using here. So as I move on, a few terms here that we're using. Place belongingness, right? According to Anton's, I think some of you mentioned that, right? The feeling of being at home, right? A personal, intimate feeling of being at home. And when we talk about this belongingness, there is also this idea of politics of belonging, in which people use a discursive resource which constructs, claims, justifies, or resists forms of spatial inclusion or exclusion. I think that idea was captured by Michelle very nicely, right? Where you talk about places you feel you have a sense of belonging, but also places where you don't feel you belong, right? Or you feel excluded. Two important ideas here. So here, when we talk about home specifically, it's not just like where you live, it's not just your residential home, but it's also that symbolic space of familiarity, you know, feeling that sense of comfort, that security and emotional attachment, right? So for example, when I go to the Philippines, yes, that's it's my country, it's my home, but I don't necessarily feel that kind of familiarity. So, you know, where's my home? This other notion of politics of belonging. So we want to expand this idea a little bit, because when we talk about politics of belonging, we're talking about membership to a group and ownership of a place. So these are the two key factors, at least according to this definition, in any politics of belonging. And that belonging is inherently spatial, right? It's spatial in a sense that people's sense of belonging is defined not just by the people themselves, but it's also defined by other things. So this is clarified by our the third points here. There are two opposite sides. There is that side that claims belonging. You know, I can always claim that I'm a Hong Konger, but there is also this other side that holds the power of granting belonging. So I'm going to give you an example here, what this might mean, right? To help us to start thinking about what multicultural belonging here. So if we look at the right side of this slide, for example, this girl, she was trying to apply for a Hong Kong SAR passport, but then she was denied, right? So definitely we can see here that she was trying to become a Hong Kong citizen, but there is this other side. This other side is the immigration, right? The state, you know, the government that has the power of granting her that citizenship, in effect, her sense of belonging. So in a sense, she claimed that sense of belonging, but on the other hand, the state sort of excluded her, at least in this situation. So there are two opposing forces here, according to this example that we have, right? And this is very important because belonging is a product of the active part of our citizenship, right? So if we feel accepted by the state or the government, or, you know, whatever place that has the right to grant us citizenship or belonging, then that has, you know, that has the capacity to shape our sense of belonging. And another important point here is that when we try to broaden this idea or this notion of sense of this belonging, it does require a substantial democratic ethos of inclusion. So what do we mean here? So apart from those groups who try to, let's say, integrate or to become part of the society, it also requires, for example, the whole society or the whole community to think about who these people are. For example, who these new immigrants are, who ethnic minorities are, how they are represented in the community, what do people know about these people, perhaps new Hong Konger or newcomers, right? So it's not just people just trying to come in, but it also requires the whole society to think about who these diverse people are, for example. So there comes the notion of second order plurality. I think this quote here explains it nicely, where diverse cultural groups will not belong to the political community in the same way, meaning to say, we construct or we develop our sense of belonging in very, very different ways. And that's what we're going to do in the remaining of this this seminar. We're going to show you some of the data that we have, which really shows us that, let's say, the Hong Kong Chinese young people and non-Chinese young people, they do have, there's some commonalities, but they're also, the way they describe their belonging can also be quite different. And these notions are very important because, again, when we look at the different population groups in a society, there is no one mode of belonging. People just, you can't simply say, oh, this is how you must belong to this society. It doesn't work that way. You know, there is no unitary mode of constructing belonging, because ultimately our lives, right, the different lives or the different communities or the different social circles that we are part of can shape the ways in which we construct our belonging. So there is this idea of differentiated unity and particular expressions of this unity. So meaning to say, in our context in Hong Kong, the different population groups express or they construct different images of what Hong Kong is. So I think if I apply this question to the audience here, you might describe Hong Kong in very different ways. So likewise, there are also different ways of claiming belonging to Hong Kong. The thread, right, if we just simply look at or revisit, you know, just look at the responses that you shared with us in the chat room, there are many ways to claim belonging, right? Some of you said that it has to do with your professional background. Some of you said it has to do with your language. You know, some of you said where you feel safe. Hey, Helen, nice to see you, Helen. Yeah, where you feel safe, where you feel accepted. Very ways of claiming belonging. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here with all these concepts that I'm throwing in here. And Aaron, I'm gonna hand it over to you to talk about what we did on the ground. You were very involved in this process.
Thank you, Jan. So like what Jan has just said, I think belonging is a really complex and qualitative thing. And as such, it really requires a qualitative approach to understanding how belonging plays out. For our research, we conducted 8 focus groups with an even split of number for the Cantonese speaking and the English speaking group of people. We started our recruitment around the time of September 2019, and then the first focus group was actually carried out 1 month later. And we finished the entire thing in somewhere in December 2019. There are a few points I would like to share about in regards to the limitation we experienced, but can we go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Oh yeah, so let me just first explain the demographics. So for the Chinese speaking focus groups, the people, or actually for both groups, we only recruited 18 to 24 years olds. So there were 2 to 6 people on average in the Chinese speaking groups and 2 to 4 in the English speaking ones. By ethnicity, the Chinese speaking groups only had Chinese as their ethnicity, and they were almost, all of them were born and they were raised in Hong Kong, whereas the English speaking groups, not all of them grew up in Hong Kong, and some of them came to Hong Kong for their education, and the average years in Hong Kong were 4 to 23 years old. And so if you look at the bottom of this slide, you can see that we put these limitation, and obviously absent rate was really high during the entire data collection period because of many reasons. But as you may have already guessed, it's really hard to find participants during that time. In fact, my teammates and I had made hundreds of calls throughout the entire project. And like 60% of the people didn't turn up if they even though they agreed to join. So we really had a hard time dealing with that. And the reasons behind, I guess, is just people always had this perception that because young people took part in the entire movement, so we should be expecting many young people wanting to join our focus groups. But in fact, young people just wouldn't want to do a focus group because, say, if they are members of the ethnic minority, they may have concern about their political position. So if they are too outspoken, maybe they risk being having that scrutiny over their application of visa or their education or their future careers. Unlike people who were born in Hong Kong, ethnically Chinese, they had less concern for their own future in regards to that. But also, in general, people had concern for their safety, given the location of the venue that we held our focus groups in. And there were also, like the slides suggested, traffic disruptions to people. So yeah, these were some really difficult things that we had to deal with. There were also two more points I'd like to share. One funny thing is some of the people we had the opportunity to speak to, maybe they were just finished, they just finished their secondary education. So basically the DSC exam. So they still carry that exam mentality. So because in Hong Kong, people had to go to these oral examinations, right? So even when they were finished and they went to these focus groups, they still, trying to be, they speak in a really structured way, to put it simply. So we had to actually adjust our way of asking and had to do with a little bit of experience to actually get the flow of the entire discussion going. And also because the questions that we asked were quite personal, I would say. So since we are talking about belonging, and belonging isn't quite a common idea compared to places other than Hong Kong, like in America or in the United States, United Kingdom, sorry. And so maybe they were keen on, holding back the thoughts to themselves, or maybe they haven't thought about these kind of topics at all. So sometimes we had to end the session earlier than expected, but then also sometimes people are really into these kind of topics. And so, there's always this potential of them wanting overrunning the entire thing. So these are really interesting points that I would like to share. Jan, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered everything. It was a very interesting and an unexpected research journey altogether. I don't have anything to add. So yes, I'll start talking about our findings then. Sure. So when we spoke to the Hong Kong Chinese young people, so they had this sense of when they describe their belonging, they tend to hold on to this idea that they have a common culture. Of course, this idea of common culture, just being a Hong Konger, but also what's special in what they're saying is that they want to keep this culture undiluted, right? Like a very strong sense of Hong Konger identity, if you can put it that way. And to just show you some quotes, it's like this, right? So this participant was saying that, oh, don't intend to find something foreign to the Hong Kong culture suddenly, don't put things in, don't put things away. It's best to do nothing, just keep that kind of Hong Kong culture there. And there's also this other participant who's saying that, well, a sense of belonging is the common memory, common benefits, common aspirations, common culture, everything that they have in common is very important, right? And the more commonality they have, the stronger their sense of belonging. So if we delve into this idea of culture a bit more specifically, they did talk about language. And the language here in Hong Kong is Cantonese. So a lot of them tended to talk about, well, being able to speak in Cantonese is very important for them. And in turn, that became one of their commonly used discursive strategy when they are in contact with foreign culture. So I saw in the comments earlier that, well, does belonging need to be territorialized? Well, my short answer, it doesn't have to be territorialized, but then when people talk about their sense of belonging, you tend to see some boundaries here and there, although these boundaries change from time to time. So in the data that we have here, as mentioned, they tend to say that, well, if we speak to if they speak to their fellow Hong Kongers, you know, they have a common understanding of their language, right? So when they say what "oh mouth" is, right? I guess even though that is spelled in English, I don't think this is an expression that other English speakers would understand, right? Because this is like a slang or a language that is specific to the young people here. And yes, and then also when they meet their fellow Hong Kongers who speak Cantonese in other place, then they immediately feel like that there's a sense of belonging within that group or that community. So the other thing that they talked about, well, this, as we mentioned, that this research happened during, you know, the social movement. And it was not surprising then that a couple of them did talk about or did describe Hong Kong as a place that that was unsafe, that is insecure. So they started to develop tensions regarding their sense of ownership of Hong Kong, right? Describing that Hong Kong, they still identify with Hong Kong, of course, but then they had this sense of idea that, well, Hong Kong was not so stable anymore, right? I think this participant, Kate, was very explicit, right? She was saying that Hong Kong was in a mess, and she no longer felt safe, and then Hong Kong would not be the same, you know, and therefore troubling times. This participant captured that idea. And then there is this other participant, Ceci, said that, well, she used the word mess, and that Hong Kong is still part of her repertoire in her sense of belonging, still have a very strong sense of belonging, and it's not something that could change easily for her. So before I move on to the other set of our findings, I'm gonna stop here again. So I'm gonna give you another 3 minutes just to share with us your thoughts, your responses, because as we mentioned, people construct or describe their sense of belonging in different ways. So we want to have your thoughts here. What promotes your sense of belonging to Hong Kong? That's question number 1. Question number 2, what impedes your sense of belonging to Hong Kong? So 3 minutes. Yeah, you can just answer in very short phrases, and I would be very happy to see a busy chat room. Or if you want to speak through the microphone, I guess that's also fine. Or if you like, you can build on the responses that you gave us earlier, right? I mean, there are several things that help you establish your sense of belonging, but are there particular elements or sources that can promote your sense of belonging further? Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Working in Hong Kong. Length of time, yes. Yes, the longer time you spend in Hong Kong, the more you understand its culture and like the way things are done. Even the institutional culture within, let's say, in a university or your own workplace. Thank you, Sujata. Yeah. Acceptance and tolerance, friendliness by local people. Yep, the lacking of language ability would impede a sense of belonging. Anish, yeah, other EMs being leaders in this space, right? Well, I guess you're one of those, Anish, right? Being leaders in this space. Yeah, stereotypes, right? I think stereotypes would be one of the things would lower or would impede your sense of belonging to Hong Kong, because that is a form of exclusion where you don't feel welcome in one way or another. Yep, ability to use Cantonese. Yes, thank you, Kathy. Yes, so I guess yeah, what you're saying is pretty much the same as our participants, right? Impediment. Yep. Stereotypes about Guaylos. Yes, thank you, Melissa. I think yeah, that's a very interesting one, because I think there seems to be a very mixed idea about the term Guaylo. Some people think it's racist. Some people think it's not. I think that's an interesting debate to have on its own. Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Excessively bureaucratic culture, Kelly. Yes, the workplace culture in Hong Kong. Yes, some can be quite bureaucratic, and it sometimes takes a while. It takes people a while to realize that how things can operate here in Hong Kong. Okay. Being able to speak fluent English in Hong Kong is a double-edged sword. Yes, I think that's also very interesting, Michelle, because yeah, I know that some Hong Kong Chinese people can be stereotyped by their fellow Hong Kongers when they speak with a particular accent, or if they speak with let's say a westernized accent. You know, that these people can sometimes become a laughing stock, that he or she is a BBC, ABC, CBC, you know, that kind of thing. Yes. Talking about Hong Kong. So yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, so very interesting thoughts here. Very interesting thoughts, and it's great to see the very busy chat room here. I guess yes, that's very helpful, and in many, I think some of you do agree with some of what our participants are saying, but also in many ways you are describing your sense of belonging in very different ways in terms of what promotes it and what impedes it and so forth. So the other set of findings that we have pertains to ethnically diverse youth, right? The non-Chinese young people. They also talked about a sense of communality to their Hong Kong experience, meaning to say, despite their different cultural background, they know that they're part of Hong Kong because a lot of them did grow up here in Hong Kong and they were studying in Hong Kong. So this was part of their repertoire or their discursive strategy as a way of claiming their social membership here in Hong Kong. So when they talk about this commonality, so it has more to do with their memories, right? So there is this person talking about the common memory of being here in Hong Kong, and that, you know, when they grow up, when they become like older, then they're able to relate to the fact that yeah, they're part of Hong Kong, they were here, and they could relate to this kind of memory that they share. But there is also a very interesting set of response from Chris, a Filipino, who described that, well, that this common memory has also to do with what Hong Kong is like to him, like that it has this global kind of identity, or this international identity that is sort of embedded in Hong Kong's discourse, and that in fact he felt that he's part of this the sense of globalization, if you like. So that's another aspect to this. And another interesting part is of our findings is like, yeah, they're able to identify with their ethnic minority peers. So I don't know how you might interpret this one, but I guess they tend to talk about their interaction with their non-Chinese ethnic minority peers and feel that these people can relate to their cultural experiences more compared to let's say Hong Kong Chinese people. And I guess from these, from their narratives, it's pretty clear that their cultural membership to a group is very much assigned by other people or come from other people from the way they describe their relationship with these other people. But what's interesting is that despite this cultural experience, this discursive sort of strategy is grounded with the identification of being a local, right? So there is this term we didn't use here in this presentation that is called translocal. So people like me, probably known as translocal. So in many ways, the participants, they describe themselves that way, right? Being able to identify with people, being able to relate with their cultural background, as Kay suggested. But there's also this Indonesian girl who described that, I think she was specifically referring to a group of Indonesians at her university. And those Indonesians were actually international students from Indonesia. But Cecile herself was a local Indonesian. So she felt that she couldn't quite relate to those Indonesians from Indonesia. So at the end, she went back to her other local minority friends. So this is a very interesting example. So social acceptance towards ethnic minorities. So here they're talking about the majority, how they long for the acceptance of the majority Hong Kong people, right? And yes, it's part of their narrative in terms of the way they describe their cultural membership in Hong Kong, in which they refer to their interaction with Hong Kong Chinese people. They see Hong Kong as an ethnically diverse society, whereas this discourse is not as evident among the Hong Kong Chinese youth if we try to do the kind of comparison. And they do also understand that the ability to speak Cantonese is key to greater social acceptance towards minorities. So there's this example from Joseph, right? He was talking about how his Chinese peers were teaching him to speak in Cantonese, if you can speak Cantonese, then you're part of our Hong Kong society, and it's an experience that Joseph appreciated. He appreciated that. There's also another example from Nisha where she described that, well, despite the fact that we're different, we're also from here. We're from Hong Kong, and that Hong Kong is made up of a lot of ethnicities, right? And that they're Hong Kongers too, which is why I brought up this term translocal. You're a local, but you're a slightly different kind of local, according to Nisha. So just to summarize a little bit, the Hong Kong Chinese youth. So again, this is just a very rough typology, and it's not meant to be a very exhaustive one, because there are other things that we were able to see in our data, but of course we don't have the time to present all of these. So we just managed to just show you just bits and pieces of what we were able to collect. So Hong Kong Chinese youth, they talk about their common culture, language, but also specifically their sense of insecurity here in Hong Kong. But at the same time, the ethnically diverse young people, they talk about their sense of being a local, having a common memory, and that yes, that they want to be accepted by the local peers. So I don't know. I guess I copied this quote here by accident, but it's meant to be another quote. It's my mistake there, by the way. And yes, so now that we have these findings, we sort of want to take stock and just see how we move from our findings towards thinking about multicultural belonging here in Hong Kong. Right? Because what we realized in our research is that the socio-political situation did underscore the different modes of belonging in Hong Kong. It sort of became a trigger for different people to think about their sense of belonging in this place, right? And yes, of course, the way they saw, the way they understood Hong Kong could differ in terms of their social emphasis. And yes, there is that question, where do their sense of belonging come from? You know, how do they claim this ownership here in Hong Kong? Belonging in practice. Yeah, Aaron, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. So I guess the takeaway from, like, my takeaway at least, is that everyone is capable of showing a strong attachment to Hong Kong. It doesn't really matter where you're from, your workplace, your educational background, as long as you have thinking, like you can literally relate to Hong Kong. And such connection or attachment can get really detailed. Like, our participants drew on very common culture, memories, and how they felt secure or insecure during their time in Hong Kong. And this is a really interesting point because people often generalize things, but in terms of personal everyday experience, that is a really complex and qualitative thing that we just cannot ignore. And the third point is that our research, I guess, is just covering one tiny aspect of belonging. So the problem of belonging, I guess, transcends and it intersects with different disciplines in terms of language, perhaps. Of course, like the slide has suggested, is acquiring Cantonese the only necessary condition to belong to Hong Kong? That is a really interesting question. And language, political views, music, culture, these are all relevant things that people relate to week in, week out. So yeah, these are all relevant things. Next slide, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you want
Sure.
to? Yeah.
Yes, I'll do the next slide. Yes, and yeah, thanks for those pointers, Aaron. Because here in this slide, we wanted to be a bit more specific about certain things. In that, yeah, as we mentioned at the beginning, is that this idea of belonging is constantly being redefined. You know, according to time and space in a very broad sense, but also the kind of socio-political situation that we have in these days in Hong Kong. Knowing that this idea of belonging can change from time to time, I think there is this really concepts from Blomrad that's very interesting. That can draw our attention to three further aspects. One is this idea of multiplicity. So, for example, if we take Hong Kong as an example, to what extent is it acceptable to have multiple cultural affiliations, especially if we're looking at people who are not ethnically Chinese, if you put it that way, right? That's one. And also there is this idea of positionality. So, for example, if you talk about your ethnicity, right, or you talk about your own background or just your personal biography. So in Hong Kong, so how Chinese does one have to be regarded as a Hong Kongers, right? So you have to be really a Chinese person to be regarded as a Hong Kong person. I think Jeffrey Andrews is a very good example of this, right? I think when you ask him whether he's a Hong Konger, he would say he's a Hong Konger, right? But well, even myself, I don't have that ethnic Chinese background. So yes, there is this notion of positionality, right? We're a Hong Kong person, but we're slightly different. But also the third aspect is the claims making, the kind of claims that we make about being part of, being a member of a society, right? So what actions, I mean, it's not just about what we say, but it's also about the actions that we do or that we perform to be recognized or to be accepted as a full member of a society where you feel that, that you're really part of this place, not just in Hong Kong, or maybe just that you're part of your workplace or whatever community group that you're involved in. So if we try to bring these ideas in the broader context of Hong Kong, is Hong Kong a place that nurtures soul? And I think that's very interesting, because if we look at some of the government's discourse, it does describe Hong Kong as a multicultural talent pool. So if we look at this, the subheading here, it says Hong Kong is home to a diverse talent pool, equipped with the skills and knowledge to drive businesses in Hong Kong and beyond. So my question here, as we end our presentation, is: do you agree that this is the case, right? Yeah, I think, I guess our time is up, right? James, or did you?
Yeah, yes, I think so, Jan. Because people will start to have to get to other things and tea time and so on. Yeah. But thank you so much, both of you, Jan, Aaron, for the fascinating exploration of the concept, using your research as a springboard, really. I mean, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say how much we enjoyed hearing about the research, but the research prompted such a fascinating discussion. And didn't we use Zoom well, the chat and the voice bit? So well done us as well. So much for us to think about, so much to take away from this afternoon's discussion. I'm going to pull out two things straight away. The first one is the notion of a translocal identity, which I think is really important. The idea that your belongings can be both here and there, somehow simultaneously. I think that's an important concept to work with. And the other thing is that the point that I was making earlier, the idea that a social political situation moment can trigger a renewed reflection on one's sense of belonging. Profound and sudden changes around you can make you think about your belonging in ways that you potentially hadn't done before. I'm going to share my screen again very quickly, just to say a couple of things to wind up for the afternoon, if I may. Whoops, there we go. That's the one I want. It's the thank you one. We're having a break from our event, so over the summer, to give us the chance of a holiday, and also to work on, concentrate on working on our website. Our website is still in development, but I'm very pleased to say that it is developing well. We are going to have a blog on our website, and we'll be welcoming and also inviting guest bloggers to write about their work where it intersects with belonging in the ways that we're interested in. So if you feel like contributing a guest blog, please get in touch with us. Our email address is at the bottom of the screen there. And as usual, I would like to, in addition to thanking Jan and Aaron most profoundly, thank you so much for giving us your time, your thoughts, your insights and expertise, and of course for doing the research in the first place. I'd like to thank the rest of the Belonging Research Network team, the Nexus team, Michelle, Anish, Jennifer, Anath and Adeline, without whom none of these activities would happen. So thank you very much again, everyone. I wish you a very nice afternoon and rest of the afternoon and evening. And if we don't see each other, a very happy summer.